Okay, biology students, today we're going to finish up our discussion about cell transport. Um, Again, before we do that, I kind of want to review just maybe a little bit some of the things that we've already talked about. So, before, I want to say it was the first lecture video that I gave, I showed you this picture. And again, it's showing us our phospholipid membrane, our bilayer, our cell membrane. And it's showing us that, some substances like oxygen gas, water, I mean, these things can easily just pass through this lipid bilayer. And again, just, diffuse or, if it's water, we call it osmosis. But again, just moving from areas of high concentration to low concentration, those things do that all the time. Okay, they're just tiny little molecules that can squeeze right past these little phospholipids, and they can just move back and forth across the membrane, no problem. But sometimes you get other molecules that have trouble, getting past this membrane. Whether or not they're just too big, or maybe they have a certain charge to them that won't allow them to get through. Now, these things, you know, you would think would need to come into a cell. Cells need proteins, they need sugars, all these things, right? So, I mean, but if they're just too big to get through, then we have an issue. We have this problem where they need to get in, but they can't get in. So that's where we get into this term here. It's called facilitated diffusion. I want to break this down for you real quick. Okay, so let's first talk about diffusion. Diffusion again is the movement from high to low, right? So I mean, look at this picture here. Here we have these little red molecules here. Let's just say that they're, I don't know, glucose, for example, like big sugar molecules that need to come into a cell. Okay, but again, they're just too big to pass through the phospholipids. So they need a little bit of help. Well, that's what the term facilitated means. To facilitate means to assist or to help. So what is it that's, kind of embedded in the cell membrane that can help or assist these large molecules and allow them to enter the cell? Well, those are channel proteins. Remember, we talked about channel proteins before. They kind of open and close and allow things to enter the cell that normally couldn't get in. Okay, so this is what we call, again, facilitated diffusion. Again, it allows larger molecules to come in, but again, it only allows them to come in through those channel proteins. Okay. Um, Now, again, because these molecules are moving from high to low, they don't require any energy. This is just like the natural flow of molecules, when they're going from high to low concentration. So we call that passive. If things are moving from high to low concentration, you don't need any energy. Your cells any energy. They just normally flow in that direction. So again, facilitated diffusion is kind of a passive thing. Here's a little animation. There we go. Kind of showing. I'm going to go back real quick. Kind of showing you again how these molecules can move. From areas of high concentration to lower concentration. They're moving across the membrane, but they're going through the channel. Okay, and again, this process doesn't require any energy. It's a kind of a passive process, but it is facilitated because those molecules would not be able to get in if they didn't go through the channel. Okay, so remember that. That's kind of an important thing. All right, now we have a term called active transport. So really, everything we've kind of talked about up to this point has been passive. things moving from high concentration to low concentration. I like to think of passive transport as like imagine you were on a like a raft or like in a kayak or something in it in the middle of a river, okay? And the river is flowing in one direction, okay? So if you wanted to get downstream, really all you would have to do is just sit in your kayak or sit in your raft. I mean, the water is just going to carry you, right? I mean, you don't really have to exert any energy because the water is kind of doing all the work for you. So think of like diffusion and osmosis. Think of anything that's going from high to low as just being on a river and just going with the flow, with the direction of the current. But sometimes in cells, materials need to go the other direction. So imagine if you're in your kayak and you need to get upstream. You need to go against the current or against the flow of the water. Well, then you're going to have to exert some energy, right? You're going to have to paddle, to get upstream to go against that current. That's what active transport is. All right, active transport is going from low concentration to high concentration. And that's going against the natural flow, right? So if cells are going to do that, if they're going to force things to move from low to high concentration, they have to exert energy. And as a reminder, we talked about this in the last unit or in the last topic. Cellular energy is called ATP, right? It's also known as adenosine triphosphate. That's kind of the scientific name for it. But just remember those three letters. All right, ATP, it's cellular gasoline. I kind of refer to it that way. But again, if things are going to move against the current, again, from low to high concentration, your cells have to utilize that energy. Here's a little animation here that kind of gives you an idea of what's happening. So again, here's our cell membrane, okay? Here's our channel. And you'll notice these molecules here. Notice how there's a higher concentration over here. There's a lower concentration on the other side. So if those molecules are going to move from low to high concentration, the cell has to exert energy. Okay, it has to. This is like moving upstream, moving against the current, because normally those molecules are moving from high to low. But again, if the cell needs to bring more in, it's going to have to exert or use ATP and exert that energy. And again, most of the time this happens with some kind of a channel protein. So it's kind of facilitated in a way, but it is active because it's moving from low to high. This is passive facilitated. Okay, this picture here is kind of showing you active facilitated diffusion. So hopefully we can see the difference there. Now, when it comes to active transport, there's a couple terms that we generally use. This term here is called endocytosis. So think of the word endo, right? That's a prefix you guys had to learn, first week of school. Endo means inside. So a lot of times cells have to bring things in. And a lot of times that means that the cell is going to have to exert energy. Think about this cell here. Like to surround this little particle, and kind of engulf it. The cell is using energy to do that, right? But again, this is kind of an active transport process. Typically, there's two things that cells do. It's called phagocytosis, which means cell eating. That's usually when they're taking in like a large clump of food. A lot of times you'll see like little protists, like little amoebas and things like that, that do this. The other one is called pinocytosis, which is called cell drinking. That means they're taking in large amounts of liquid. But both of these things are kind of similar. They both require energy. They're active processes. The cell has to use ATP, but it's bringing things into the cell, so we call that endocytosis. Then we have the opposite. This is called exocytosis. Again, this is a type of active transport. You don't see it here in the video, but on the other side of the membrane, um, there's a much higher concentration. So it's kind of forcing things from a low to a high concentration, which again is going against the flow. So again, this would require energy. This is a lot of times how your body cells, in fact, every cell in your body has to get rid of waste products. And a lot of times, getting rid of that waste means to kind of force it out of the cell. Basically, I mean, your cells are gonna have to use energy. I mean, think about, and this is kind of a gross, I guess, analogy, but like when you go pee or when you go poop, right? You're forcing things out of your body. You're either forcing urine out or you're forcing, poop out, feces out. But your body is exerting energy to do that, right? Well, your cells are the same thing. When you're, I mean, think of exocytosis as like your cells pooping. They're forcing waste out of them, and that would require energy, right? So again, this is a form of active transport. It requires energy by the cell in order to do that. So exocytosis, cells pooping. I don't know. I guess that's a good analogy, hopefully. Kind of gross, but whatever. All right, now this last picture, I really like this picture because it kind of sums up everything that we've talked about the last couple of lectures. So again, here we have our cell membrane, right? We've got our phospholipid bilayer. And over on the left, we've got three different substances, whatever they are, okay? So this substance up here, you'll notice that it's just moving from high concentration to low concentration. And it's just moving right across the bilayer. It's not moving across a channel. So that's just diffusion. It's just, again, particles from high to low. Now, if this was water, we would call it osmosis. All right, but whatever, it's probably some generic particle. It could be anything. We just call it diffusion. But again, if it was water, we would call it osmosis. Here we have another substance here in the middle. And for whatever reason, this substance isn't moving across the bilayer. It's moving across the channel. But again, it's moving from high to low concentration. So it is diffusion, right? Because it's moving from high to low. But it is going across the channel, so we call that facilitating. All right, now regardless if it's going through a channel or it's not going through a channel, because it's moving from high to low, it's called passive transport. Passive just means it's moving with the current, right? You're on the raft, you're on your kayak, you're just moving with the direction of the current in the river. That's what's happening here, okay? Now, down here, we have a third substance, and you'll notice that it's in a much less concentration over here than it is over here. So if it's moving from low to high, automatically that's active transport. This is moving upstream, it's going against the current. Energy has to be used. Okay, so this is an active type of transport. So again, I like this diagram because it kind of shows us everything. If you understand this diagram, then you understand all the different types of transport that can occur across the membrane. Okay, so this is an important one. All right, guys, have a good day. That is it for cell transport. Have a good day, everybody.